If you think cassette tapes are just dusty relics of the past, you haven't heard what modern players can do to your old mixtapes. We've tested the top 7 players on the market to see which one actually brings the magic back and which ones are just plastic junk. Number 7. Reshow 218TSI. This device markets itself primarily as a cassette to MP3 converter, designed to bridge the gap between your analog past and your digital future. Upon unboxing, the first thing I noticed was the packaging, which included the player, some basic earbuds, and a mini USB cable. I spent a good amount of time with this unit, specifically trying to digitize a few rare demo tapes I had lying around. The premise is promising. You plug it into your laptop, use the included software, and theoretically you have a digital file. For someone purely looking to archive old voice memos or non-musical audio, it does the job functionally. However, once you actually get the device in your hands, the experience takes a nosedive. The build quality here is undeniably the biggest drawback. The plastic casing feels incredibly hollow and fragile. When I squeezed it even slightly, the chassis creaked in a way that didn't inspire confidence. It feels like a toy you would get in a cereal box, rather than a piece of audio equipment. During my testing, the buttons, especially the play and rewind keys, felt loose and wobbly. There was no satisfying mechanical clunk that you want from a tape player, but rather a mushy resistance that made me wonder if the command actually registered. The sound quality was another major letdown during the review process. When I plugged in my high-end studio headphones to bypass the cheap included earbuds, the audio floor was incredibly noisy. There is a persistent mechanical hum from the motor that bleeds into the audio signal, which is particularly noticeable during quiet passages of music. While the USB conversion feature does work, the software provided is a generic version of Audacity that can be tricky to configure if you aren't tech-savvy. Number 6. Gracioso 318 Portable Cassette Recorder Player. This unit adopts the classic shoebox form factor, complete with a built-in speaker and a pull-out handle, reminiscent of the recorders used in classrooms in the 90s. I was initially drawn to the retro aesthetic and the inclusion of an AM/FM radio, which adds a layer of utility. Testing the radio was actually a highlight. The antenna extends quite far, and I was able to pick up local stations with surprising clarity. It runs on either batteries or a DC power cable, which makes it versatile for stationary use on a desk. However, as a cassette player for music, the Gracioso 318 falls short in several critical areas. The most glaring issue I found during my review was the speaker quality. While it is loud, the audio profile is incredibly tinny and lacks any semblance of bass. When I played a rock tape, the drums sounded like someone hitting cardboard, and the vocals were harsh and piercing at higher volumes. It is a mono speaker, so you lose the stereo separation that makes headphone listening so enjoyable, but even for a mono speaker, the fidelity is disappointing. The recording function, which is a main selling point of this model, is also a mixed bag. I tested the built-in microphone by recording a voice memo, and while it captured speech clearly enough for dictation, it picked up a significant amount of the device's own internal mechanical noise. You can hear the gears whirring in the background of your recording. Furthermore, the buttons on this unit are stiff and clunky. Pressing record requires a surprising amount of force, and the eject mechanism launches the tape door open with a violence that made me worry about the hinges snapping off over time. Number 5. Semi-ear small cassette tape player. While it still resides in the budget-friendly category, my experience with the Semi-ear was significantly more positive than the previous 2 entries. This player returns to the handheld Walkman-style form factor, which immediately makes it more practical for personal listening. I took this unit on a few morning jogs to test its portability, and it fits comfortably in a hand or a jacket pocket without weighing you down. The gray and black finish is understated and simple, avoiding the overly cheap toy look of the Reshow. The standout feature during my testing was the radio reception, combined with the cassette functionality. Unlike the Gracioso, the Semi-ear manages to switch between radio and tape modes seamlessly. I found the tuner to be quite sensitive, locking onto weak FM stations that other devices struggled to find. When I popped in a cassette, the motor engaged smoothly. The mechanical noise is much quieter here. You don't hear that grinding gear sound, which allows the music to take center stage. It feels like a device that was engineered with a bit more care regarding the internal dampening. Sound quality via the headphone jack is where the Semi-Air starts to redeem the reputation of modern players. It offers a much more balanced sound profile. I tested it with a synth-heavy 80s pop tape, and the stereo separation was surprisingly distinct. The highs were crisp without being ear-piercing, and there was a decent amount of mid-range presence. It lacks the deep, thumping bass of a vintage Sony, but for a modern budget player, it provides a pleasant listening experience that doesn't fatigue the ears. There are still some minor downsides, but they are blended better into the overall package. For instance, the plastic door feels a bit light, and you have to be gentle when closing it to ensure the tape aligns perfectly with the heads. 4. Gracioso Bluetooth Cassette Tape Player. And this is where things get really interesting. This device attempts to modernize the cassette experience by solving the biggest headache of analog audio, the wires. I was skeptical at first. Mixing analog tape hiss with Bluetooth compression sounded like a recipe for disaster, but after testing it, I came away genuinely impressed. The pairing process was seamless. I held the Bluetooth button, and it connected to my wireless earbuds in seconds. Walking around my house listening to a cassette tape without being tethered to the device was a liberating experience I didn't know I needed. The build quality of this Gracioso model is a significant step up from its shoebox cousin at number 6. It features a transparent window design that lets you see the tape spinning, which adds a fantastic visual element to the playback. The buttons have a nice tactile rubberized finish, and the overall chassis feels denser and more durable. I accidentally knocked it off a coffee table onto a carpeted floor during my review, and it survived without a scratch or any impact on playback speed, which speaks volumes about its durability. Audio-wise, the Bluetooth transmission is surprisingly robust. I tested it with a high-quality Type 2 Chrome tape to see if the wireless signal would crush the extra fidelity, and it held up remarkably well. You get that warm, saturated tape sound, but delivered through the convenience of your modern noise-canceling headphones. If you prefer wired listening, the 3.5mm jack is still there, and it sounds excellent, clean, loud, and punchy. The motor seems to have more torque than the previous models, resulting in very consistent playback speed with minimal drag. One feature I really enjoyed testing was the power flexibility. It can run on batteries or via USB power source. I hooked it up to a portable power bank during a long commute, and it worked flawlessly. Number 3. Mersoco T201black. From the moment I pulled this out of the box, I could tell it was aiming for a more premium market segment. The design is sleek, all black, and minimalist, closely mimicking the aesthetic of the classic Walkmans from the late 80s. It feels substantial in the hand, weighted and balanced, not hollow. The matte finish resists fingerprints, which keeps it looking sharp even after days of handling. I tested this unit extensively as my primary music player for a week, and it quickly became a favorite for its reliability and style. The sound performance of the Mersoco T201 is excellent. It features a stereo head that delivers a wide, immersive soundstage. When listening to complex tracks with many instrument layers, I could easily distinguish the guitar separation from the vocals. The bass response via headphones is significantly better than the previous entries. It feels full and round rather than flat. I also tested the detachable external speaker feature it boasts. While small, it connects securely and provides a decent volume for personal listening in a quiet room, though the headphone experience is definitely superior. Mechanically, the T201 is a workhorse. The buttons engage with a satisfying mechanical click that feels precise. The fast forward and rewind functions are punchy and fast, unlike the sluggish winding I experienced with the lower-ranked models. I particularly appreciated the implementation of the auto reverse mode. It's instantaneous and quiet. You don't get that loud clack buzz sound when the tape flips direction. It just seamlessly continues the music, which is a huge plus for uninterrupted listening sessions. Another huge positive I found during testing was the battery door and compartment design. It might sound trivial, but many cheap players have loose battery springs that cause power cutouts if you shake the device. Number 2. Reshow cassette player recorder. Now, do not confuse this with the number 7 spot on our list. While they share a brand name, this specific model, BGCF4WM6, is a completely different beast. It's as if Reshow listened to every complaint about the 2118 SI and fixed it. The first thing I noticed was the upgraded build materials. This unit features a metallic finish casing that feels premium and cool to the touch. It has a solidity that the other Reshow model completely lacked. I put this player through a stress test of recording and playback, and the results were stellar. The recording capability on this model is vastly improved. I recorded a vinyl record onto a blank cassette using the line-in jack, and the playback was almost indistinguishable from the source. The internal circuitry has clearly been upgraded to reduce noise floor and hiss. When playing back commercial tapes, the clarity is crystal clear. The highs shimmer, and the mids are rich and warm. It handles high bias tapes much better than its competitors, extracting more detail from the recording. One of the best modern features of this player is the USB-C power option. In a world where everything uses USB-C, being able to power your cassette player with the same cable you charge your phone or laptop with is a game changer. I tested it using a MacBook charger and a standard phone block, and it worked perfectly with both. This eliminates the need for carrying extra cables or hunting for AA batteries. However, if you are off the grid, it still accepts batteries, giving you the best of both worlds. The user interface is also refined. The volume dial is smooth and linear, allowing for precise level adjustments without the static crackle you often get on cheaper potentiometers. The buttons are recessed slightly to prevent accidental presses in your pocket, a thoughtful design choice that I appreciated during my commute testing. Greadio GB-X2A. This isn't just a Walkman, it is a full-blown retro boombox that serves as the ultimate media center for any physical media lover. I was blown away by the versatility of this machine. It plays cassettes, sure, but it also plays CDs, has an AM/FM radio, supports USB playback, and features Bluetooth. I tested every single mode, and it handles them all with surprising competence. It's the Swiss Army knife of retro audio. The cassette deck on the Greadio is the star of the show. Unlike the portable units which rely on headphone drivers, the Greadio uses dual stereo speakers that actually push air. I tested it with a bass-heavy hip-hop tape, and the room-filling sound was impressive for its size. The bass has a thump to it, and the vocals project clearly across the room. It brings back the communal aspect of listening to tapes. You aren't just isolated in headphones, you are sharing the music. The soft eject door mechanism feels premium, slowly opening to welcome your tape rather than snapping open. What truly sets the Greadio apart and secured its #1 spot is the inclusion of a remote control. It sounds simple, but being able to control your cassette and CD playback from across the room on the couch is a luxury I didn't realize I missed. During my review, I set this up on my bookshelf and used the remote to skip CD tracks or mute the audio when I got a phone call. It integrates into a modern living space perfectly. The LCD screen is bright and easy to read, showing you exactly what mode you are in.